Josh Furlong joins us, KSL, covers Utah, and he's with us now on 365 Sports with Paul Craig, and I'm David Smoke. Josh, thank you very much for your time. What has this week been like in Salt Lake City after all that happened during the game, at the end of the game, and after the game against BYU?
Oh, man, that's a loaded question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's been a wild week. I mean, obviously, the way the game ended was a frustration to the University of Utah fans. BYU fans were really happy, obviously. But then just to kind of see what happened after the fact with the athletic director kind of throwing a fit, kind of saying the game was stolen from Utah, it really kind of changed the tone and the narrative of the game and everything to the, where that became the focus, right? And all of a sudden now you're getting 9,000 views of, was it a holding call and everybody's interpretation of it. And then people asking, if an athletic director should be acting like that. I mean, it's been a wild week, but, I think there's a lot that you can go into it with it, but it's not getting any easier for the University of Utah, that's for sure, because it's just been a tough season. It's not the season that they were expecting. So I think there's just a lot of pent-up frustration that's going on, and unfortunately, some people decided to act out in that way.
For Mark Harlan to kind of throw another dart at the Big 12, and look, everyone knows that Utah wanted to be in the Pac-12. Like there's no bones about that. I don't think anybody is resenting the fact that that was their first choice. But to throw that out there in that moment of frustration, does that have deeper meaning, or was that just rage quitting on his part?
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of had a similar reaction of, why did you throw in the Big 12 in there? I mean, you could throw in the refs and complain about them, but the fact that you wanted to say something about the Big 12 itself was a little suspicious. I like you said, I mean, I think at the end of the day, they loved being in the Pac-12, and Mark Harlan and the University of Utah, administration, they loved being in that in that conference. They felt like they were with like-minded institutions. They loved the competitive, nature of it, and they felt like they were in a good landing spot. So I don't know if there's still a lot of maybe frustrations from that, and it just kind of came out because this is the first year. But it did seem odd, right? I mean, I think it is getting out maybe some of the true feelings of what Harlan felt, in the sense that, there is frustrations with this not being their desired destination. And now when you have a situation like that, where a game where you felt like you should have won gets messed up by one of their officials, which I might add, the official used to be a Pac-12 official, but we're going to ignore that one. That one gets a little bit more tricky.
Josh, was it a hold?
I think by definition, yes, right? Like, I think it's not as bad of a hold. I think that the frustration that they came down to was more, they've let these guys play throughout the entirety of the game. In the Big 12, there's a lot more physicality between the corner and the receiver. And so to throw a flag in that situation, I think that's what frustrates people.
Right.
You can watch it and you say, oh, he tripped and he fell. Yeah, maybe. I think all of those kind of exist. At the end of the day, the corner's hands was on his body, and it kind of limited him a little bit. Now, is it the most egregious hold? No, we see worse every single week, and there's holds all the time in football. But I think that's where they're most frustrated, is like, in that situation, why are you calling that, knowing that this is what's going to happen? So,
sure. But
at the end of the day, it is a hold, right?
Did it just put an exclamation mark on what has been a miserable year?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where their frustration came out, right? I mean, I think obviously losing 4 straight before this game, there's going to be a lot of frustrations, and there have been, right? And they've held it together in a public face, and everything's gone well for the most part in that front. But now you're going up against your heated rival, a rival that you honestly don't lose to that often. I mean, over the last 10 years coming into that game, you had a 9-1 record. This felt like the opportunity where everybody's recharged. You can go in there and get a win. You were up 21-10 at halftime. And so everything kind of felt like there was this turning point. Okay, we've had this terrible season. It hasn't gone to plan, but everything is now going well. We've got a defense that is doing well. The offense is moving the ball. And then suddenly they reverted back to the same stuff on offense in the second half. And then to have that kind of ripped away from them in the way that they felt like was a disjustice, that just kind of was the icing on the cake, right? And I think you felt a lot of frustrations from that they weren't just about that game. It just kind of came all out as one because of the magnitude of that game and kind of what it means to people in this state, and just everything else that has gone on in this team. So I definitely think it was kind of everything coming out at once, but it's just unfortunate that it kind of was exhibited in the way that it did.
Are there any quarterbacks that are still like physically able to move alive there?
That's a good question. I mean, Isaac Wilson is available, right? I mean, he's had some minor injuries that I wouldn't say that they haven't impacted him, because every injury can have an impact, right, in how you perform. But he's fine. So, I mean, they do have Isaac Wilson, the guy that they have used most of this season. So he'll be okay. Now, beyond that, it gets much more dicey. You've got Luke Batari, who is a walk-on quarterback. He did play against Colorado last year in the final game of the regular season, beat Colorado, but it was a completely different game plan. He's clearly a different skill set than what they have as scholarship players. So it's really the Isaac Wilson show. And beyond that, I mean, if you're having to go 5-6 quarterbacks deep, I mean, that just kind of tells the story of the season, where they've already lost 3 quarterbacks and they're kind of stuck where they are. So it's been a rough season. Obviously, nothing is really getting better. They've got players that are already committing to the transfer portal or intimating that they are, and so it's been quite the last few weeks, especially with how the season's gone that way.
Josh, I've followed Brent Kelce particularly closely because he's a Texas guy. Obviously, injuries are unfortunately nothing new for him, but having covered him these last few years, what are kind of your takeaways of just watching him, talking to him, interviewing him, and just how brutal of an end is that? Although I guess, somewhat fitting, but still, it's just I hated to see that, another lost season for him.
Yeah, Brent Kelce is one of those guys that the time that he got here, he was always the true professional where, I don't know that he loves media sessions, but he's going to do it. And he's going to be the face of the team, right? And he's going to do everything he needs to kind of put on a good face. But behind scenes, he was a phenomenal athlete. He put in the work. He worked hard. He wanted to make sure his team was doing really well. And he did everything he needed to. I mean, coming into a couple of years ago, he was considered as one of the top tight ends in the country, and was on pace to potentially be one of the first, a first or second round type draft pick. And then just injuries have started to derail his career. And it's unfortunate because he was having such a great year. I mean, it wasn't what he expected based on what they, had with Cam Rising and everything, but he still got his numbers. He was still showing that he could be an NFL type tight end. And now for another year, you're getting this season ending injury. And it sounds like it's pretty serious. I haven't heard officially from anybody what the true injury is, but like that at that point, like he's older in age. I can't imagine this helps his NFL stock anymore. It's just unfortunate to you if you could go rewrite history and tell him go to the draft right now, because he turned down an NFL Combine invite to come back for one more year, and that's the season he got hurt the first year. It's just unfortunate to see for his sake. What this could have meant for him. You could have at least been paid pretty healthily in the NFL. Now you're getting paid in college, but it's not the same. And there's a real risk that this could impact his career, knowing how many injuries he's had and how later in his life he is to this point. So it's unfortunate. He's a great guy. I mean, like, you wish him the best. It's a terrible way to go out. Unfortunately, his brother had a similar situation where he had to medically retire because of injuries. So just a tough situation all around. Brent seemed to be the guy that was going to kick that and be fine, and now they're kind of stuck in the same spot again.
Josh, back to what Craig brought up, the quarterback situation. They've been decimated by that, and obviously the latest news on Rose. And then the Cam Rising that went on and on and on. Do you think, in a way, this is not to be personal to him, but did that hold Utah football hostage? Because you would wait for a guy like that to come back. And secondly, if he all of a sudden decided he wanted to come back again because he has another year, what would happen? Would that be probably, man, we need to move on and move into a different era?
Yeah, I mean, I to answer that last question, I don't think there's a real likelihood of him coming back. I mean, I think he sees kind of where it's at. I think Utah has kind of been in this situation before. And I don't know that there would be a consensus where they both felt like this would be a good way to come back. So I think at this point, if Cam wants to pursue the NFL, or maybe he, pursues another team, I doubt it. He doesn't want to be in college anymore. I think he either has to decide, do I want to try to make this a thing? Do I want to try the professional ranks and see what I can do? Or do I just hang it up, maybe go into coaching, that kind of stuff? I think that's more likely. I don't know if calling it hostage is necessarily the right thing, but I think that actually, it's a good fitting term for this. I think the problem is Utah put all of their eggs in the Cam Rising basket. And I think all of the praise of them being, the top pick in the Big 12 and having these playoff expectations, they're real. It's not like this team has changed. I think this team is still talented. But the problem is they felt almost invincible that they had Cam back and everything was going to change, right? He was going to kind of be the savior of the program, so to speak. And everything was going to come back. We're going to go back to those 21 and 22 seasons where you won Pac-12 championships. And, I don't know if they fully in their mind, really thought it out that, injuries are part of the game. Now, nobody's expecting a hand injury at a Gatorade table that is going to derail a season. But I think everything was in that. And so you had players committed because of Cam. You had the coaching staff that was kind of committed to Cam. Andy Ludwig, honestly, was probably not going to coach again unless Cam came back. And so you had all of these things surrounded around Cam. And when he was kind of in that in-between, suddenly you have a team that's still trying to hang on for dear life while not really, scheming to the skill set of a true freshman quarterback that isn't Cam Rising. They have some similar traits, but they're not the same player. They don't have the same game. And so you really kind of handicapped your offense, you handicapped the team, and suddenly now you're in retrospect looking at this on a 5-game losing streak, wondering how it all went wrong. And it's easy to kind of point the fingers that they just honestly put all their eggs in that basket.
Josh, we know what it's like to cover teams when they're winning. It can be a lot of fun. And then there's years like this where it's just really, man, it's just like it never ends with just the bad news dumps. But what are you as a reporter and I guess maybe even just Utah fans in general, what is there kind of down this stretch do you feel like to sort of look towards when it comes to the future and hopefully what is a turnaround sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I mean, I think the general consensus among the fans is that the season's lost, obviously, and I don't know that anybody really cares if they get to a bowl game. Bowl game just delays the inevitable and everything. I think that would help in terms of not having a losing record. But I think there's a huge sentiment of the fans that are ready to kind of move on in the next era of the coaching staff. They love Kyle Whittingham. It's not that they want him gone in the sense that he's a terrible guy and they don't have all that. But I think with Morgan Scalley as kind of that head coach in waiting, they kind of want a new regime. They want to see how this goes. 20 years with the same head coach is a long time. You're seeing it in Kyle Whittingham's face. He's having conversations about that and wanting to hang it up. And I think it's kind of to that point where, if he is having those conversations, there's this subtle nudge from the fan base. It's like, it's time to move on. Let's see what we've got with the next. Now, that's not always the best thing, right? That can be a dangerous game, and it doesn't turn out to be the same way, and you end up in a world of hurt. But I think they really do love Morgan Scalley. They love his defense. He wants to exhibit a more modern offense that isn't all about ball control and being conservative. So I think that kind of gives people hope that if that happens, maybe this next year, which will probably be pretty big in the transfer portal and changing the team, that'll give them hope, knowing that the next year maybe things can change.
I just don't know. No, go ahead. You
finish your thought.
I just don't know. Is this the way that Kyle Whittingham wants to end it?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think in some respects he was kind of in the same vein of, Cam Rising will get us to the promised land, and I can retire in my 20th year, and everything will be great. But I think in the same vein, you get to retire on your own. You get to do it on your own terms instead of getting fired. And not that he's at a risk of getting fired. I mean, he's untouchable. But I think this gives you an opportunity to kind of go out on your own terms, even though it was devastating. It was nowhere what you'd want to be. The only hope that maybe he stays is that he wants to go back to BYU and beat them again. But that would be probably it. I don't. To be honest, I think it's more likely trending that way just because of the emotional toll that it's taking on him for this season.
Josh, I was going to ask that about Coach Whittingham. How do the fans feel about Morgan Scalley and the future whenever that is?
I mean, I think there's always cautious optimism, right? I mean, he's a Utah man, and that's what they love the most. He's not a guy that's going to be chasing a bigger job or trying to get swooped up somewhere else. I mean, he's been offered, great jobs at USC and other places around the country, and he continues to say that Utah's his home. And that it truly means that to him. He wants to be there. He's committed to the program. He's got great vision, great recruiting. And so I think they have all the belief in the world that he can be a guy that can do that. You never really know when a guy gets that head coaching role and what that takes. But over the last few years, Kyle's been giving him more responsibilities in this team. So it's not like Morgan would come into this completely unexposed to what a head coaching world looks like. The biggest difference is he's just never been a head coach. And so there's going to be, some trial and error. There's going to be some decisions that he's never had to make. But I think there's optimism there that he can do it. The defense will stay the same. The real question is, can he make that transition while also bringing in an offense that becomes more modern, that brings in more excitement? Because the fans are honestly tired of just seeing the defense always out there doing their best, but you want to see a competent offense as well. That's kind of the counterpart to what Utah does on defense.
So, Josh, final thing for me. I know that the emotions at the end kind of took a lot of the air out of the room there, but what was it like to be at Rice-Eccles Holy War conference game? I mean, did it add any extra substance to it, or just kind of from your perspective, what was the atmosphere like for those of us not able to see that madhouse in person?
Yeah, I mean, I think having it back in conference was I don't know what I was expecting, because I've covered this game, for many years, but outside of the conference setting. And so having it come back, I mean, I think there was just so much more interest in it. Obviously, BYU being undefeated helped. Obviously, Utah wanting to kind of spoil their season helped that as well. But I think it just means something. And when it means something, this rivalry is at its greatest. It's obviously at its worst, too, because fans get a little crazy, as every rivalry does. But I think when you have something on the line, it means so much more, and it's exciting in the state to be able to have that. And then in the energy in Rice-Eccles Stadium, it's so much fun to have those kinds of games to witness, because you get to see how the fans are interacting and see kind of the passion that they have. And going into that last stretch, I mean, the Utah fans were loving it, right? Rice-Eccles Stadium was hopping, and it was a loud, raucous environment like it has been in the past. And then suddenly that last minute changed the entire tone of the game. But that's what makes it great. It's going to be one of those things that everybody's going to look back on that game. It's going to have something that matters, probably better for BYU in the sense of their rankings and playoff aspirations. But it's fun. I mean, I love those games. I would take those games any day of the week.
Last thing, I saw you were has physical therapy with one of your children. Everything good? Did you coming back from an injury? Everything okay?
Yeah, I have a son that's a pitcher, and he did something earlier this year. It essentially, as an adult, it would be a UCL tear.
Oh.
So he's essentially recovering from that and trying to get him rehab so that when the baseball season starts again next year, that he'll be ready. But it's a long, arduous process that I go every single week with my son and just sit there as he goes through physical therapy. So
good for you.
It's fun.
Good for you, Josh. Thank you, man. I know you've had one hell of a week. My goodness, and all since just Saturday evening, whatever. I do know this: the country got a big dose of what the Holy War is all about, and hopefully we'll have much more of that game. It appears that's the best part about those two now being in the same conference. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great week, sir.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Josh Furlong, KSL Sports. That's a lot.